Look, it works. So thank you very much for having me here. It's being Scandinavian, being at ICA is really strange because it's the biggest supermarket chain in Scandinavia. With the same name, same font, same logo, everything. So I've been looking at all of the people working here, and they have like this. I'm wondering if they're selling fruit or if they're into art. I'm not really sure, but it's very interesting. I'm going to talk a little bit about my background with the projects I've been working with, and kind of why I think it's important today. So my background is I grew up with computers, became a hacker very early on, like 10 years old. I started with computers. And I'm 36 today, so it's a long time. I'm one of the first digital natives, I would guess. And so I have kind of the same sense of how computers affect our lives as most of the kids today, even though I'm quite old. So that puts me in some sort of senior position. When I grew up, I using computers, copying things, and realizing that's the way I learned because it was the only possibility I've had. I didn't think about it as a bad thing. And I didn't do that until I actually saw people saying it was bad. Let's see if this works.
Jackie and I are on a mission to stop piracy.
If this were a movie, we could be on the bad guys ourselves.
But this is the real world. We need your help.
When you buy pirated movie and music, you support criminals.
Now these criminals are counterfeiting other things, like electronics and medicine.
Take action.
Demand the real thing.
Help us stop piracy.
Let's terminate it.
And I'm afraid to say this is not a joke. This was an actual advertisement from Hollywood. And for me, as kind of the only way of getting attached to culture and getting some sort of culture was actually illegally copying things. It made me feel really weird that I was supposed to support criminal networks by copying something without any money involved. And growing up, seeing this, I researched a little bit and found another group of people called Piratbyrån, which was doing things about internet and digital communities way before most other people were doing that. And Piratbyrån means the Bureau for Piracy, and it was a wordplay of another group in Sweden at the time called Anti-Piratbyrån, the Anti-Bureau for Piracy, which was a Hollywood-founded lobby group. And Piratbyrån's first kind of attempt of copying and doing something good with copying was actually copying the name and remixing it a little bit to take out the bad negative things. So removing anti to become something which was more interesting. Piratbyrån was a group of a lot of different people. It was hackers like me, activists, intellectuals, artists, people from left to right on the political scale that were interested in this new medium which was the internet. And we never really agreed on anything, but we worked a lot on kind of making people discuss the internet. And we were never interested in having the answers. We were more interested in actually putting up questions that people could think about. And this is a little list about things we've been doing the past 14 years. So we've done a lot of things, and most of these things are interesting only for us, but that was kind of the thing we were doing. We did a lot of things because it was exciting for us, and then some of them turned out to be interesting to other people as well. The biggest thing is probably why I'm here today, which was the Pirate Bay. Pirate Bay was an attempt for the Piratbyrån to actually use a new technology at the time in 2003 called BitTorrent. BitTorrent is a file sharing technology which changes the way you download and upload on the internet. Because usually on the internet you would download from a central location. You would download from a website or from some sort of file server. But BitTorrent makes it so that you upload and download from thousands of people at the same time, potentially. So it was much more optimized for the way the internet works. It's distributed, and it also enabled everyone to participate in the sharing of information, whereas the old systems were very much elitist systems where you had to be invited to be able to download and upload. And Pirate Bay was, to begin with, an experiment about technology and to use it, and mostly for Scandinavian people. So the website was in Swedish, and most of the users were from Sweden, Denmark, Norway. And all of a sudden, BitTorrent became a really big thing on the internet. People started moving away from the centralized services of the internet to decentralized services. mostly because they were not that easy to take down, because the centralized services, you just sent in a letter to the owner of that server and he would take it down because he was afraid of the legal consequences. And since BitTorrent does not, you don't host any content centrally with BitTorrent, so it was a totally different legal aspect of it. But there is still the pressure, the legality pressure on Pirate Bay. So the competitors of Pirate Bay at the time were run mostly by kids. And these kids were really scared when they got letters from different Hollywood companies and music companies saying they were going to sue you for all of the money in the world and so on. So they started shutting down. And we didn't really notice that our competitors, if you want to call them that, was shutting down until we started seeing that most of the information, most of the files on Pirate Bay were in Spanish, even though the website was in Swedish. Because it happened that one of the big Spanish websites got shut down and people just moved to the only alternative that was left, and that was the Pirate Bay. So for a long while, one of the most downloaded things on the Pirate Bay was a Swedish language course downloaded by people in Spain and other Spanish-speaking countries, just because to understand what the hell was going on with the website. I'm really proud to say that Pirate Bay has always been like a thorn in the eye of the Hollywood industry. They even called us an official global icon, which we put up on our website as something good. They meant it as a negative thing, that we were making piracy cool and so on. But yeah, the thing that really made us big and made people interested in what we were doing was that we had a different agenda than most other people on the internet. We were interested in protecting the internet and the core values and the distribution of control. So when we started getting these legal threats from Hollywood especially, we replied to them in a really mean manner. So like, this is one of our most famous letters, is we basically replied to them saying, like, you can complain about your law in the US, we're in Sweden, you have to invade us if you want to go here and control us, but you can go fuck yourself because we don't agree with what you're doing. And the Hollywood people are not really happy when you say that to them, but they don't know what to do with it. And we started getting a lot of these letters. And we didn't just reply to them, we published all of the letters, both the letters we got and the replies that we got. And I think that was the driving thing towards why people came to us, is because they realized we had an agenda behind just the technology. So there was social pressure behind the technology as well. We made this into some sort of prank art thing. So this is one of my favorite legal threats that we got. It's a company in Germany that sent out this letter saying that we were allowing people to download fonts that they own. So all of these typefaces that they have, especially Helvetica, which was downloaded quite a lot on Pirate Bay. And they sent a contract to us that they wanted us to sign and pay them a lot of money. So we decided that we have to copy this letter and make them sign some sort of cease and desist declaration. And so we just reversed all of it. So like, instead of us paying them, they were supposed to pay us. And we of course used all of the fonts that they complained about, which was the typical thing that we always did with Pirate Bay. Like, if someone complains about what we're doing, we're gonna just keep doing that even more. And that became very much the fun of Pirate Bay and the thing that made us grow and grow and grow. And we noticed that we were really big when we started having a huge impact on the actual internet in Sweden. There was a lot of talk in 2004, 2005 about censorship of the internet. And the Hollywood industry was mostly trying to get internet providers to shut down websites that they didn't like, that didn't pay them enough money and so on. And there was a big case about the website called allofmp3.com, where you could legally buy music from Russia, where you paid Russian fees to the music artists. So instead of paying $1 per song, you would pay 10 cents per song, and it would be totally legal. But some internet providers decided that they are going to stop all of MP3, even though it was a legal website, to support the artists. And we were really afraid of this censorship from a third party. So we decided to block these ISPs from accessing the Pirate Bay. So if you're a user on one of the ISPs that had their own censorship, you could not use the Pirate Bay. You would just get a website saying, like, your internet provider is shit, he's censoring you and your internet, we don't agree with this, and here's the phone number where you can call and cancel your subscription. And after 3 days, one of the providers actually lost 40% of their customers, because people were mostly interested in downloading things for free on the Pirate Bay. They did not care about all of MP3, but they really cared about the Pirate Bay. we did a lot of these things, and people got really, really upset about it because we had power that they were not okay with us having, and they wanted to, to be the way they wanted to be. So Hollywood wanted to control the internet. And after a long while, Hollywood sent representatives to the White House that invited the Swedish government to come and talk to them about the problem of the Pirate Bay. The Swedish government said, well, the Pirate Bay is legal in Sweden, we can't do anything about it. It would actually be illegal for a minister in Sweden to go and tell the police that you have to take down a website. But nonetheless, the White House said that if you don't take down the Pirate Bay, we are going to trade sanction you. We're not going to be able to trade with the US, and we're also going to sanction you in the World Trade Organization. So it would be Sweden, Pakistan, and Cuba that would not be allowed to trade with the United States, which would be awful for the Swedish economy based on ABBA. So in the end, what happened is that just a few weeks after this meeting, the 50 police officers in Sweden came and took all of the servers from the Pirate Bay and 200 other companies because they didn't know how a server looked or whatever it was. So they just took a lot of these machines out and had a big raid. And in Sweden, this was clearly a political motive behind all of this. And people went out to protest outside the government building. I don't think a lot of you speak Swedish, so I'm going to translate what says in this banner from this protest. It says, "Give us back the server, or we're going to take your fax machine." Which kind of show that there is a generational shift here in between, like who actually understands the network and not. Let's see what else here. And when using all of these, the attention we got, we also started doing a lot of pranks to make sure that we had a lot of fun and people didn't understand what the internet was, and we wanted to spark debate in different ways. So one of the things we did was, for instance, we tried buying Sealand, which I think a lot of you in this country know about. For those who don't know, Sealand is a small micro island outside of Leeds, I think. And it was up for sale. It was someone that claims to be the prince and king of Sealand. They were trying to sell the country. And we decided, drunk on alcohol, that we were going to buy this country. And we did the first crowd financing campaign on the internet. And I remember still being drunk. I was seeing on Larry King's show, the Prince of Sealand and Warner Brothers top lawyer, talking about what is going to happen when we own Sealand and what's going to happen with the international copyright treatments and so on. Which was very interesting for us because it was just a prank, but it had some sort of idea behind it that maybe there's time to update copyright law and so on. In the end, we actually could only manage to raise like $25,000 or $50,000. And they wanted 6 billion, which is kind of outside of what I have in my pocket. So we didn't actually buy the country, unfortunately. And we did all of these pranks all the time. And the interesting thing was finding a level where it was believable, but kind of insane. For instance, we both claimed to have been bought by eBay and been sold to eBay because their logo looks like our logo. So we just remixed our logo a little bit because we have the same font and colors. And people actually believe this because it could be true, because they didn't know about it. We invaded a country that does not exist, and just to see the reactions of American people, to see the support we got for this invasion, because we claimed that this small micronation, which is artwork of Lars Vilks in Sweden, we said that they were really bad towards their population and so on, so we invaded them to liberate, as the United States people are really happy with. So we had a huge following by tens of thousands of people in the United States supporting our invasion of this non-existent country. And they didn't really realize that it was a joke until I actually photoshopped this airplane from Tintin on top of a Google map saying, look, they have weapons of mass destruction. And they kind of got the joke in the end. And we also claimed twice that we actually are hosted in North Korea. And the second time we actually stole all of the IP addresses for North Korea, which meant that for 2 weeks North Korea could not use the internet, which they can't anyhow, but it really looked like physically we were located in North Korea. People didn't understand how it worked. And the confusion in people's minds were kind of high because the United States does not like us, which means that North Korea could potentially like us, and potentially they don't care what happens with their internet, so it could be plausible that we were hosted there. And all of these games were always very fun for us to play. And we even tried to list Pirate Bay on the Swedish Stock Exchange, which was a really interesting experiment. And we tried getting the deal that you could only own 1 share each as a person in the company. In the end, it turned out that someone actually scammed the whole stock exchange in Sweden and made a lot of money on on doing that. But it was an interesting experiment because we never really cared about what people had as an impression of the Pirate Bay. We never cared about the reputation or anything like that. It was more like an ongoing discussion, and actually I still want people to hate the Pirate Bay a little bit as well, because it's a good breeding ground for doing something new. Let's see if this is what I think. All of the attention that we got has made us be called, people call us artists, and we're always taking the labels that people put on us and try to go with it. So we've exhibited at Manifesta Biennale, for instance, in Italy with our bus, which was, we bought a bus in Sweden, and we took a lot of people that never met each other in a physical world and put them on a bus trip from Stockholm to the north of Italy, just as some sort of art exhibition thing. And then we got invited to the Venice Biennale, and that was really interesting because we decided to go there without computers. So we were doing small pyramids of paperwork as some sort of art exhibition, and it became really big news for a while because Pirate Bay is not allowed to be in Italy, is kind of what they're saying there. So you could download this small paperwork and you could make it into a pyramid, and you could upload the picture to our website, and that was the artwork. But the actual police in Italy came to take down the Pirate Bay, which they thought was hosted in Venice during the Biennale, because they did not understand. And we were kind of portraying the Pirate Bay as being something which no one understands, which has been really fun. Let's see. So, and what happens is that when you don't understand what someone is doing, is our opponents have always tried putting labels on us, which has always been really funny to us. So I'm going to show a small clip from a documentary about the Pirate Bay called Away from Keyboard, which is kind of a term that I've been very famously attributed to have said, because I don't believe that internet is, you can have a lot of people say IRL in real life, but I think that the internet is actually real, so I preferred using the term away from keyboard. And that has been the name for the documentary, which I'm going to show a little bit from you.
Till att börja med så tror jag inte på att det skulle finnas någon form av idé hos vanliga ungdomar om att upphovsrätt skulle vara fel eller så. Det tror jag är en myt, och den har liksom den här kopimistsekten varit väldigt duktiga på att marknadsföra.
Yeah, so this woman is the representative of Hollywood in Europe. She is the top Hollywood lawyer in Europe. And she started calling us cult very often in interviews. All the time when she talked about us, referred to us, she called us a cult. And for me, it's really interesting knowing this person, because she's the lawyer for two things in Europe. It's Hollywood, and then she's the top European representative for the Church of Scientology. So she should know what a cult is. So being from Pirate Bay and being from the background that we have, that we take labels that people put on us and we make it into something cool, like pirates, we decided that we have to do something about being a cult. So this happened.
This is wild. Some people seem to worship technology, but now it's being recognized as a religion. Yes, in Sweden, a church whose central tenet is the right to file share has been formally recognized by the Swedish government. It's called the Church of Copy-meism, I guess, copy-meism or copy-mism. Okay, and it claims that copy acting, sharing information through copying, is akin to a religious service.
Yeah, so we do things like that. We take it a little bit too far sometimes. But the interesting thing about registering a church in Sweden is that it's super simple, because Sweden split with the state church in 2000 and made the most liberal law in the world coming to what a religion is. So it's 50 euros to register a church. As long as you have some sort of Bible, it will be recognized by the state. And I also found out that in most of the surveillance laws that we have, in the IPRED directive, in the monitoring surveillance laws in most countries, there is an exception for religious communication. You're not allowed to listen in and register what someone is talking to with their priest. So confessions are not allowed to be listened into. And for me, coming from this peer-to-peer background, P2P, I decided that I'm going to do as the Mormon church, where everyone is considered to be a priest, and I want to have priest-to-priest communication, which means that effectively if you download anything, if you file share anything on the internet, you can just claim it's part of your religion, and you could actually not be surveillance for that. And for 50 euros, it's kind of a good hack for the billions of money that's gone into the lobbying. besides doing all of these pranks, we also try doing some, we are doing quite a lot of businesses and different companies surrounding this. And most of it is about making people understand that the people who are controlling the communication and controlling the discourse on the internet are not really always interested in having an open discussion. So like when you talk about, especially with Hollywood and the music industry, talking about how to finance music and films and so on, they're usually talking about how to finance the people that are already financed. So I decided a long time ago that I wanted to start something which would enable everyone to be financed on the internet, and I found a company called Flatter. And here's a small video about that.
On the internet, you can create or take part of content. When you create, there's not really a good way to get money for the content. And when you find something you like, there's no good way to show love for it. This problem is universal. For bloggers and their readers, musicians and their listeners, photographers, film creators, programmers, and so on. So we created Flatter to solve this. This is how it works. Every month, the Flatter user pays a small fee. Let's compare it with birthday cake. When you have a cake, you want to give slices to the people you like. Flatter helps you do that. If you've created something, you can add a Flatter button to your content. Or if you find something you like, and there's a Flatter button besides the content, you click it. Each button is a counter showing how many people are willing to give cake for the content. At the end of the month, your cake is sliced in as many pieces as you clicked Flatter buttons. Each slice is then given to the correct content creator. If you click 10 buttons, the 10 creators will get a 10th of the cake each. If you click 100 buttons, the 100 creators will get 100th of the cake. The slices might be small, but everyone's slices will all add up. Or as we say in Sweden, många bäckar små blir en stor å. As a creator, you will get money you've never got before. As a consumer, you can help creators out with just a small click. If you haven't guessed it, Flatter is a wordplay of flatter and flat rate. With a flat rate fee, you can flatter people.
And for me, the big thing about Flatter is actually that everyone is a creator on the internet. It's not, we don't have like this separation anymore. Everyone is the same. And most of the systems out there for enabling people to get money is about enabling the same people to get money as before. And something which was very interesting to see with Flatter is that a lot of, especially German newspapers, started using Flatter for their own articles, but also allowing people that comment on the article to connect with their Flatter account. So sometimes you would see on a German newspaper that someone who made a really interesting, clever comment would actually get a lot of Flatter clicks for it and make money actually from his participation or her participation in the discourse and the discussions surrounding the topics at hand, which is kind of changing who is considered a creator and participating in that. And what happens on the internet is always that if you do something that people don't like, you're going to be really, really hit by some sort of sanction. And we've always been trying to work against that. So WikiLeaks, as you might know, was hit by this big blockade from Visa and MasterCard and PayPal and so on. In the end, only Flatter could allow them to receive money. And that is kind of the way we work. And people were, the banks were not really happy about sending letters to me for Flatter and saying that we have to take down WikiLeaks as a customer because they knew what we already done it before when we started getting these threatening letters. So for a long while, you could only actually support WikiLeaks from Flatter, which was very interesting. For me, everything is about actually what happens with the internet. That's what I'm working mostly with right now, is that to make sure that people understand that the shifts that's been going on with the internet and that we're kind of living in a small lie right now about how the internet works. A lot of people think about the internet as a decentralized system, and technology-wise it is, but not when you look on what's on top of the technology. If you go back just like 7, 8 years, this is how the internet looked in terms of services. And most of these services you don't even remember anymore. Like 8 years ago, the biggest social network was called Orkut, which was owned by Google. And I don't think anyone here remembers that at all, but it was the second biggest website in the world. And right now, most of the websites here are not even existent anymore. And if they are, they're really part of Yahoo or Google or Facebook. or Microsoft. It's very few people or very few companies that own most of the internet. We have centralized the content of the internet so much that it doesn't matter that we have a decentralized structure underneath it. And I've been trying to work against all of this, starting projects that would make some sort of way against all of this. So I've started, for instance, a VPN service, which would allow you to surf anonymously on the internet. We've started our own VPS system where you could have your own services hosted in our cloud. We tried starting a messaging system, which would be against centralization of WhatsApp, which has been bought by Facebook and so on. Some of these work, but some of them don't work. And the problem is that people are now too lazy and they trust these services, the big services, so much because they have not seen a backlash in what happens with their data. So for me, like having this engagement with trying to make sure that people have alternatives, it's kind of depressive to see that even if you have better technology and you have a more honest and more interesting kind of background and a goal in what you want to achieve, that does not really matter if you have an easier or cheaper option from some of the bigger companies. And just by looking at what's going to happen is like, we talked a little bit about the internet being, everything is moving to the internet. And right now, for instance, a very typical thing is that most of you know about the 3D printers that look like this. You can print out small things and it's kind of a gimmicky thing. But in like 15 years, we know that we're going to print stuff or download stuff like meat and food and clothing and so on. So the laws that are applying right now and the services that we're centralizing right now are going to be the same services that are going to control like food and stuff in the future. I don't want Monsanto to be able to decide who gets to print their food and not. So for me, it's really important that we set kind of the standards right now in what we want to achieve with copyright law and centralization of these services. And the thing is that human progress has always been speeding up, but the thing that happened with the kind of the internet and computers is that it's speeding up so much that we can't really follow what's going on. And the only one that can actually understand and grasp this thing are the companies that are thriving right now, like Google. They have so much money that they can just like buy whatever coming out, and they're going to control our future quite a lot. And we can just hope that they're not going to be bad. And the speed of everything is so insane. Like just 10 years ago, people said you can never have a self-driving car. And just a few years later, Google had a self-driving car. And next year, you will be able to buy a self-driving car. And in probably 10 years, people won't get a driver's license anymore. And you will not actually be able to drive a car in 15 years because computers are going to be so much better that we're going to ban that. And for me, that raises questions already right now because in Sweden, the government, for instance, just decided that the piratebay.se, the domain name, is not going to be available for usage anymore. They're going to block that domain name. And we are laughing at it from a technical standpoint because you can just change to another domain, but it's setting a standard for like having addresses being censored. And even though you can circumvent them, in the future you will not be able to do that. Pirate Bay was sued and lost the domain name in Sweden, and the same day as that the verdict was released, it was released and revealed that the biggest Swedish banks had committed crimes against, they were supporting or not working hard enough against terrorism. So they were sued with and had to pay a big fine, bigger than the Pirate Bay fine in our court case. So I got really upset about this because no one tried to take the bank's domain name away. They tried to take the Pirate Bay domain name away, but what's the difference with the bank? So I actually sent in a letter to the police telling them that we have to take away the bank's domain name because they're committing crimes. And what's the difference between Pirate Bay and this big bank? And to make a point of that, I actually told them that we can't only just take away the domain name from the bank, we also have to take away the addresses from the land registry of all of the offices because, well, all of the laws are technologically neutral in Sweden. So there's no difference with an address if it's virtual or not. So, and for me, it's not about actually making that happen. It's more about to make people aware of the differences that's going to happen in the future. And I'm pretty sure that these laws that are the things that we're doing right now with domain names and other sorts of censorship will also affect us in the future. So you can't go to certain markets because someone has sold something pirated. It will be taken out of your GPS maps and so on. A lot of these things and projects are also kind of, I've gone from the hacker background into the activist thing and doing a lot of internet activism, but what I'm seeing is that all of the politics and all of the activism, everything is it's very dense right now. It's very combined. So there is a pirate party in most of the countries in Europe and growing outside of the world as well. But I've been more interested in actually starting other parties. So I started a party in Sweden as some sort of political joke or activist or stunt called the Same Democrats. And there's a party in Sweden called the Swedish Democrats, which is the right-wing party. It's far right of the UKIP, I think, that don't like immigrants. So Sweden also has indigenous people called the Same. So I started the Same Democrats having the same party program as the Swedish Democrats, but I just included like the Swedish people as immigrants to the Same country, and trying to use their own politics against them to actually make the Nazis move out of Sweden, which they're really hard at understanding how to deal with. And these things are kind of what's happening right now, and on top of the internet you're doing all of your politics and so on. So the censorship is really something we should work against. And my last video here, so I'm doing a lot of things that are political and a lot of activism stuff, and I actually tried last year. I was in prison for half a year last year, but just before going to prison, I tried to run for the European Union election as some sort of a joke and a political stunt as well. I'm a Finnish citizen, so I decided to run in Finland for the Pirate Party without being a member, because I don't like the party. You have to be a member of the party to run for a party. And my big campaign move was that if I was wanted by the Interpol for my involvement in Pirate Bay, which was insane. So if I got elected for the European Union, I would actually get diplomatic immunity and didn't have to go to jail. And since the Finnish people don't like the Swedish people, a lot of people voted for me just to mess with the Swedish government. But for me, the most important thing was actually to make people discuss the topics at hand. And in order to do that, I decided to do the most awful video ever in EU politics campaigning ever. I'm going to end with that, and then we can talk. I decided not to talk shit about opponents and not to talk about anything about my politics. I'm just going to make a lot of attention instead.
Je t'aime, oui je t'aime.
Got enough votes, but a lot of people asked me about my politics after that. So the day before the election, I had 8 pages in the biggest newspaper in Sweden just dedicated to my politics by not talking about it at all. So it's interesting, but I'm not a good politician. So I think we're going to talk some math now. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, I think all of us will know it's a great pleasure to see Peter out in the wild rather than inside a Swedish prison. So it's fantastic that you're here in London. I think one of the things that you started off with was the idea that it was really important to look for things that were believable but insane. And I'm kind of interested in what is the way that you look for that? Is it something that comes at you, like a company or a legal case? Or is it just a particular kind of feeling for the structure of reality?
No, I think it comes from kind of something that feels fun to do. It usually starts with the humor of it. And then, you know, I'm trying to see if there's something that people can react to and actually have their own ideas about and can be some sort of discussion. Because I'm really not into telling people what to think or what to believe or anything like that. I'm more interested in making sure that people take their own stance and come with a conclusion themselves. It's much more honest, and then I hope they will think the same as I do on the subject. But that's rather it's just been a way of working that just comes to me naturally, I think.
I mean, is there a particular kind of tradition you draw on for that, or is there a kind of set of principles?
Well, it's been a tradition in kind of Swedish artist scene, I think, and political campaigning in Scandinavia in general. But you know, we're very inspired by the KLF and stuff like that, which also did a lot of kind of crazy stunts that people didn't believe that were actually true as well. Most of our stuff is not true, which is the big difference.
So I guess another question that follows on from that is a more kind of thinking about, okay, if pranking or if doing the insane but believable is a kind of fundamental way of working, is also is there a kind of philosophical dimension to the way you view the internet, for instance? So, what is the internet now? How can we know it? What can we do with it? There's a kind of sense of great plasticity in the way you work. You treat reality as fundamentally as a joke or as a ground for good jokes. But what is the kind of underlying kind of way of viewing the internet?
Yeah, so for me, I'm really pessimistic about what the internet has become, because it's the big lie that people believe that you have freedom with the internet. And the technologists are building things on top of that idea, that there's a lot of freedom, that you have like freedom of information, you have freedom of access and all of these things. But in general, you're just building on top of the most unfree system we've ever seen. It's kind of like an airport. In order to go somewhere, which is your freedom to go somewhere, you feel super free that you can fly to somewhere. You have to go to the most unfree thing in the world, which is an airport, where you're checked everything and they have like these body scanners and all of those things. So in order to be free, you have to be super unfree. And that is very ironic to me. And I think that this year I realized quite a lot that most of the things that I've been working on, the things that we've been working on, making sure that the internet becomes, we've lost all of those causes, we lost all the cases, like what Snowden revealed, what Manning revealed, all of these different things that we know about, the censorship, the surveillance. Nothing changed, even though we know about them, and no one is caring that much about file sharing anymore, which I understand. It's kind of a boring thing to talk about copyright. But there is a sense of urgency, and there is a sense of democracy underlying the topics. But since we're not talking about them anymore, and we kind of gave up on most of these things, like we're okay with Spotify, we're okay with Netflix as the distributors for our cultural heritage. And so we kind of gave up on the discourse, and we gave up on finding new technology or finding new ways. And it's not only about technology, it's about why we have the technology. So I think that the internet is becoming more and more unfree, and I don't think even we can turn back, which is kind of the realistic view I have on it, which most people are not happy to hear.
And in relationship to the work with the internet, you've also done work in wider forms of activism, such as work with animal rights issues. How do you see those as connected?
Well, for me, it's a general idea about where I want the world to be, and that's so I have a left-wing background as a socialist, and most of my family come from a socialist background, and I think that the core values are just applied on the internet, like the access to information and the equality of people and so on. So for me, all of the activism has the same kind of agenda and background about the equal rights and so on. The problem I'm seeing with the internet is that a lot of the animal rights activists or different sort of social activism is moving on top of the internet, and by censoring the internet, by having this monitoring and all of those things, we're screwing all of the other activism up as well. Because we're moving everything to be on top of the internet. And today, top of the internet means that you have your Facebook page. It means that you have your Twitter account. It does not mean that you have your own website anymore. I'm not a member of Facebook. I don't get invited to parties. I don't get invited to events anymore, because people only invite you to parties and events on Facebook.
So you have fear of missing out?
No, I'm happy to miss out. Because I have a lot of weird friends. Like I told you before, like for a while, 4 out of 5 people on the Swedish Interpol list were me and my friends. The last guy was a serial killer. He's not arrested. The other guys are, which also is kind of fucked up, because it was all activism behind those people. Even if you can agree with that or not, that's not really the case. But the problem is that everything that's about the internet and censorship is very touchy-feely for the government. They're really scared of uprising against kind of the status quo of the internet. And status quo is really bad. It's Facebook, it's Twitter, and those guys. And that's kind of what I'm scared of, is that we're going to have even worse thing in the future than now.
So you mentioned briefly that you spent 6 months in prison for offences related to the Pirate Bay. Given what you're saying, how would you differentiate the internet and prison?
Well, I spent 6 months in a high-security prison in Sweden with some killers, Hells Angels leaders, and other people. I was considered the most criminal of them all. I'm actually convicted of aiding with possible copyright infringement. Only person in the European Union actually committed of aiding with aiding, which is interesting in itself. The idea of internet is that we have this liberty and we have the freedom. And the idea of prison is that you have no freedom whatsoever. But there is not that, well, there's a lot of things that are very similar between prison and the internet as well. In terms of being monitored quite a lot, you can't go wherever you want to go, all of these things, which is very much similar, and it's kind of scary to see. I actually sometimes felt more free and less stressed, a lot of less stress in prison than outside.
Okay, well, there's a recommendation for prison.
Not a good one, though.
Does anyone have any questions before we move over to the next speakers?
One question.
It's just quite a basic question. A lot of people that have been involved in different like cypherpunk, crypto anarchy and things like that, they've recently moved away from things like BitTorrent to blockchain technologies. And I noticed that you didn't mention this at all in what you were presenting, and I just wondered what your position was on blockchain technology.
Well, there's this movement for Bitcoin and blockchain technology and so on, which I think is, well, you're not going to solve the political issues at hand with technology. You can show people that there are other alternatives, but you're not going to kind of fix the social structures or the political structures with having new technology. So that's why I'm not a big fan of Bitcoin in that sense. I like the technology, but I don't think that the blockchain technology will actually change anything politically. And it's only for the elite, which is also one of the things I don't like. The great thing with Pave was that we kind of democratized everything, that everyone had equal access to information. And Bitcoin and technologies circumventing censorship and monitoring and all of these things, they're for the educated elite and they're not for the masses. So it's not a thing that will solve the issues. It's a thing that will just help a very few select people from the problems that might arise. So, and I also think it's a parenthesis in technology history that might be hitting me in the ass saying, but I think that is the case.
It's hard to see.
I think that's it.
Silhouettes out there. Okay.
One more.
There's a question there.
Hi, just a very brief question. I hope it's not like a simple transfer, but there's this person who calls himself Robert Luxemburg, and he yesterday sent around an email inviting for private cinema screening in Berlin, and about 10 years ago he called it the Pirate Cinema Berlin. And I was wondering, and there in the email it said there are only 12 seats available, so everyone should be quick with reserving a seat. So I was wondering whether the Pirate Bay, if you see the future of the Pirate Bay, and also kind of very much limiting the amount of people who will be able to using it.
No, so I have this mixed feeling about the Pirate Bay. Is I want it to close down because I want alternatives to kind of spring up. As I said, Facebook and Google and all of these guys are centralizing the internet, and it's monopolizing kind of their turf. And the Pirate Bay is the same. There's not a lot of alternatives to Pirate Bay. There are some other websites, but they're building on top of Pirate Bay's infrastructure. So I want it to die, so we will have alternatives. So I don't want it to be for a select elite. I want it to be for no one, so that there will be something which replaces it that's much better and has new technology and has a new kind of breath of fresh air, because it's really, really old and it looks the same and it's just as crap as it was. Because you have to remember, the Pirate Bay was never a good website. It was never good technology. It was like the only one that did not get shut down. That's why it became big. And it's still one of the top 50 websites in the world, which and it's responsible for 20-30% of the internet traffic. So it's very, very big, and it's very important to a lot of people. So rather close it down right now and replace it with something before it's too late, and no one dares to do that. Actually, the Pirate Cinema guys are the people that made us meet the first time, actually. So that's kind of fun reference.
Yeah. Okay.
You've said that you feel like the battle's kind of been lost and that the internet's being centralized. Is there anything to be done to stop that from happening?
No. I'm really sorry. Everyone asked me, and I don't think that it's possible to stop it. I think that, some sort of revolution, but I don't think we have those anymore. Not in the Western world, at least. And there's no big interest from anyone. There's no one in politics that would actually like to ban Facebook or Google in their country. That's not going to happen. They might say that you have to be more interacting with other companies that want to do the same thing, which will be impossible because you don't have the money for it. So I think we lost that case, and I think that I've said it before, but I was for Sarah Palin winning in the US, not because I like her, because I really hate her. And if she won, the US would go down much quicker. And I'm thinking we should do the same with the internet. Let's make it go fucked up, totally fucked up, and then we restart from scratch when it's totally over. So by having these things that would limit the amount of time we're spending on before it's totally fucked up, that's just bad for us. We should rather just fuck it up totally right now and then restart with something else and don't do the same mistakes all over again. But I don't think we can say what we have right now.
So the internet's going to go down, what's going to happen next?
Well, yeah. Well, it's already apparent that you know all of the problems that you have, but you're not doing anything about it. And I'm not saying you as a person, but the general audience, no one cares about what happened, like with Snowden and the monitoring and all of these things. So I don't think anyone will stop anything. There will not be any changes. So the internet is already fucked. It's just that I wanted to come to the conclusion that it is fucked, and we all agree that it's fucked, so we will do something different.
Hello, I thought it was a fantastic talk actually, so I'm just clutching at straws here, little hopes that I have. I mean, I read recently that Evgeny Morozov wrote a piece saying that we should campaign to own our data, that one thing people aren't very aware of is how our data is monetized by these companies, and that perhaps we should have a manifesto and that should be the focus for some political activity. I just wondered what, just love your response to that.
Well, so, to some extent, I agree to that. But there's a really good analogy for what's going on right now, and that is kind of STDs, like actually sexually transmitted diseases. Like doing things like that would be like putting a condom up there. You would use a condom. You would limit the amount of disaster that can happen and the way you spread the virus that you could get. But you're not actually getting rid of the disease. We're not curing HIV or Facebook by that. We're just limiting Facebook and HIV, all of these things. So I think that using a VPN for protecting your privacy and making sure that you have encryption, all of these things, it is just a condom for the problem that, at hand. And the same thing about owning your own data, yes, but someone will have access to your data. So that's actually the big problem. It's like we are sharing them without having an understanding of what will happen with them. And if you own them, you could have some legal rights, but you don't have practical rights. And control over that. And it does not work in the way the internet is built to actually control data, which is why the internet works at all. So you can have the moral rights of your information and ownership, the moral ownership of it, but you don't have the de facto ownership and control over it. So it does not matter that much.
But, I mean, could you clarify what are the criteria by which you think things are in such a bad condition? Is it about control? Is it about ownership? Is it about filtering, censorship? The siloing of the internet into large monopolies. What are the kind of key factors?
But it's all of those. But the biggest problem is that we all help with it, and it's the mindset of people that we don't have a big issue with Facebook. We don't have a big issue with Google monetizing us. We don't have a big issue of Apple kind of knowing exactly how how you're feeling, what your pulse is. All of these things. People don't mind. People don't see that as a problem. That's the biggest threat and it's not a threat. It's what's going on. The technology is secondary. It's the mindset of people. So the psychological thing of it.
But given that, what was the rationale for the plan to develop Himly, which is a secure messaging software that you spent 2 years on? It seems as a move from an uptake of crypto as a good resistant technology, which corresponds to kind of digital hygiene or contraceptive strategies, to another phase. What is it that made you change your position?
Well, I had well, I think the way I do, even I did that even before we started Hemlis, but might be better to do something instead of nothing. But I've kind of came to the conclusion that I'd rather do everything to help the monitoring state to go fucked up. Like I'm all for more monitoring now. It's good because then in the end people will be so fed up with it that they might actually be an outburst and people will be enraged. So that might actually be like when people call me stuff and tell me that I'm a terrorist or whatever they want to call me. I was actually called a terrorist on an American TV show, which was interesting. I'm going to go with it, and I think that if people are saying that we should have monitoring, let's go for monitoring everything. And in that way, people will understand why it's a problem and maybe be outraged enough. So and Hemlis would be the same thing. It would be protecting people for a while, and it would be limiting the problematic effects, but it won't make sure that they go away.
But it seems an interesting shift in position then from this kind of the early phase of work in the 90s, where you were adopting the position of the prankster or the trickster, doing the believable but insane, now suggesting that the correct tactic is to create a condition of crisis in which the state or corporations are the ones that are doing the believable insane. So you become the kind of agent of sobriety.
Yeah, then again, like the situation is insane, so we have to do something believable to get out of it. So like we ended up in a situation that is so much worse than we could ever imagined. And like the big thing, like the big joke everyone is talking about is like 1984 happened and we didn't even care about it. Like, no, it's so much worse than 1984. The book is so off in terms of how much information the government has about us. It's just that it hasn't started using it. So I think that when realizing kind of where we're at and what's going to happen in the future with centralization and AI and all of these things, it's better to do something right now than to just live in the future that I'm seeing. So.
I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap that up, but Matthew Fuller, many thank you for joining. Peter,
thank you.
Peter, thanks for coming. Cheers.